The story of American power didn't begin with Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg. It began over a century earlier, in an era far darker and far bolder. During the Gilded Age, when fortunes were forged in steel, sugar, and railroads, the real billionaires didn't just lobby Washington, they owned it. From buying state legislatures to manipulating Supreme Court rulings and even dictating U.S. foreign policy, these men rewrote the rules of power itself. Behind the glittering promise of progress, they built a political machine so corrupt it nearly collapsed the republic. Welcome to the top 10 robber barons who secretly ran Washington, D.C. before. At number 10, we have Cornelius Vanderbilt. Often called the Commodore, was the first great titan of American industry, a man who built an empire on steamships and railroads. But behind his colossal fortune lay a devastating lesson in the corruption that defined Gilded Age politics. Vanderbilt's power play to seize control of the Erie Railroad turned into one of the most scandalous financial wars in U.S. history, the infamous Erie War. His opponents, the cunning trio of Jay Gould, James Fisk, and Daniel Drew, orchestrated a stunning financial ambush. Exploiting legal loopholes, they printed massive amounts of fake watered stock, flooding the market to destroy Vanderbilt's investments in real time. Yet their brilliance went beyond financial trickery. They weaponized the judiciary. Court injunctions, restraining orders, and judges themselves became mere bargaining chips in their ruthless corporate chess game. When Gould and Fisk were summoned to court, they mocked the justice system, fled to New Jersey, and fortified themselves in a hotel, guarded by mercenaries. The message to Washington and Wall Street was unmistakable. The new American elite didn't just influence the law, they owned it. Vanderbilt's humiliation in court symbolized the dawn of a darker truth that in the Gilded Age, political control was worthless without judicial capture. The Commodore's defeat marked the moment when Wall Street's real power began not in boardrooms, but in backrooms and courtrooms, where wealth dictated justice and corruption ruled unchecked. At number 9, we have Russell Sage, the silent predator of finance, the man who proved that the most dangerous robber baron was the one who never made a scene. A former congressman turned financier, Sage mastered the art of political manipulation not through bribery or headlines, but through legislative intelligence. His time in Congress gave him a rare insider's map of how Washington truly operated, who could be bought, who could be swayed, and which laws could be quietly rewritten. Instead of taking reckless risks, Sage perfected a model of legal graft, making fortunes through high-interest loans, speculative railroads, and insider trading that skirted every possible law without ever crossing it. His quiet ruthlessness built him one of the largest fortunes of the century, all while keeping his name out of major scandals. Unlike the flamboyant Fisk or the daring Gould, Sage's genius lay in invisibility. He didn't need to control Washington with money when he could preempt it with knowledge. He set the standard for future financial elites, the quiet predator who shapes the system from within. Russell Sage's empire became a case study in political immunity, proof that true power in America wasn't seized by the bold, but secured by those who could bend the law before it was even written. At number 8, we have Charles T. Yerkes, the streetcar magnate who turned entire city governments into extensions of his bank account. Operating primarily in Chicago, Yerkes pioneered what could only be called industrial-scale corruption. His ambition was absolute control over the city's transportation, and to achieve it, he didn't just buy companies, he bought politicians. In what became one of the most notorious municipal scandals in U.S. history, Yerkes effectively purchased the loyalty of Chicago's 68 aldermen. Every political favor had a price tag. A few $100s for minor licenses, tens of thousands for major legislative votes. City Hall became his personal marketplace, where democracy was auctioned off to the highest bidder. When he pushed a 50-year franchise extension through the Illinois legislature to cement his control, the public outrage was explosive, sparking court battles and riots. Yet even after his exposure, Yerkes' methods became a blueprint for political corruption nationwide. He demonstrated how local power, once captured, could be leveraged to shape national infrastructure, influence state policy, and even manipulate federal oversight. Charles Yerkes proved that America's democracy could be bought wholesale, one city council at a time. At number 7, we have William Andrews Clark, the audacious Copper King of Montana, turned political ambition into a transaction, proving that in America's Gilded Age, even democracy had a price tag. Clark didn't just influence politics, he bought it outright. His obsession with power culminated in 1899, when he set his sights on the U.S. Senate, an office then chosen by state legislatures rather than the public. To secure his seat, Clark unleashed a tidal wave of cash, openly bribing members of the Montana legislature to secure their votes. His methods were so shameless that the U.S. Senate launched one of the most explosive investigations in its history, calling 96 witnesses and uncovering a staggering trail of corruption. The Senate ultimately declared that Clark was not entitled to his seat, forcing him to resign in disgrace. Yet, the Copper King's appetite for power was so insatiable that he later won the seat again, this time using subtler tactics. Clark's scandal became national proof that corporate wealth had colonized American politics, exposing how state houses had become marketplaces for the highest bidder. Ironically, his infamy helped ignite one of the most important reforms in U.S. history, the 17th Amendment, which ended legislative appointments and established direct elections for senators. William Andrews Clark may have bought his way into power, but his corruption forced America to buy back its democracy. At number 6, we have Thomas Fortune Ryan, a Wall Street operator who turned local graft into a national empire. In an age defined by reckless ambition, Ryan perfected the art of urban capture. He began in New York City, where he quietly bought and bribed his way into controlling nearly every electric streetcar system in the city. Over 8 ruthless years, Ryan built a hidden financial fortress through calculated deals, political manipulation, and unrelenting bribery of city officials. But his genius wasn't in how he gained local power, it was in how he used it. Ryan leveraged his municipal monopolies to amass the capital and influence necessary to challenge titans like James B. Duke in the national tobacco industry. Instead of waging an economic war, he outmaneuvered Duke into partnership, forming the colossal American Tobacco Company in 1899. That merger instantly reshaped both Wall Street and Washington, granting Ryan enormous sway over U.S. trade and industrial policy. At number 5, we have James Buchanan. As the founder of the American Tobacco Company, Duke created one of the first true multinational monopolies in American history, controlling nearly every form of tobacco except cigars. His industrial might was staggering, but his political connections made him untouchable. Duke's alignment with the Republican elite, notably President William McKinley and Senator Mark Hanna, gave him a protective shield in the nation's capital. Under their patronage, his empire thrived, even as public outrage over monopolistic abuses reached a boiling point. Duke's power was so entrenched that when President Theodore Roosevelt launched his legendary trust-busting campaign, dismantling Duke's monopoly took 4 grueling years of federal litigation. The case climbed all the way to the Supreme Court, which in 1911 finally ordered the breakup of the American Tobacco Company. But even in defeat, Duke's legacy endured. The structure of modern corporate lobbying, regulatory manipulation, and political influence bore his fingerprints. His saga wasn't just about cigarettes. It was about the creation of an industrial political complex so vast that it required the full force of the federal government to contain it. At number 4, we have Henry Osborne Havemeyer, the king of white gold. Henry Osborne Havemeyer was not just a sugar baron. He was a legislative engineer who learned to sweeten profit by refining the law itself. As the mastermind behind the Sugar Trust, officially the Sugar Refineries Company, established in 1887, Havemeyer achieved near-total control over America's sugar industry. But what set him apart from other Gilded Age magnates was his uncanny ability to manipulate Washington's most intricate machinery, tariffs and trade policy. The secret to his empire lay in one deceptively simple regulation, the tariff on imported sugar, calculated by its color grade. Since his company controlled the refining process, Havemeyer could literally decide how sugar was classified, ensuring that his imports paid the lowest possible duties. Through quiet manipulation, expert testimony, and the use of friendly scientists like chemist Charles Frederick Chandler, Havemeyer built a web of technical control that extended directly into Congress and the Treasury Department. No outright bribes, no flashy scandals, just a complete bureaucratic takeover disguised as lawful commerce. His strategy encoded monopoly into the very language of American law, transforming a simple tariff schedule into a billion-dollar weapon. Number 3, we have Collis P. Huntington. Wasn't just a railroad baron, he was the political brain behind the industrial juggernaut known as the Octopus, the vast web of the Central Pacific and later the Southern Pacific Railroads. While his partners built the tracks, Huntington built the relationships that turned Congress into their personal investment office, fueled by the Pacific Railroad Act of 1862, which showered them with federal land and subsidies. Huntington and his Big Four partners devised a cunning side scheme. They formed an internal construction company to overcharge the government for the very rail lines it was funding. But Huntington's genius lay in how he weaponized Washington. He became one of the first full-time lobbyists in U.S. history, cultivating congressmen, funding campaigns, and strategically leaking information to sabotage rival railroads like the Texas and Pacific. His letters, later exposed to the public, detailed how he used cash, stock, and favors to manipulate legislation and land grants worth millions of acres. Huntington didn't just influence laws, he wrote them. Congress became his tool, and the federal domain became his playground. By the dawn of the 20th century, his empire had turned the Western United States into a corporate colony. At number 2, we have Jay Gould, the Black Friday conspirator. Jay Gould was the dark genius of American capitalism, a man who could move entire markets with a telegram and plunge the nation into chaos with a single scheme. Known for his ruthless control of the Erie Railroad, alongside James Fisk, Gould mastered financial fraud, bribery, and political manipulation on an industrial scale. But his most infamous act came in 1869, when he attempted to corner the entire U.S. gold market in what became known as Black Friday. The plan was simple but diabolical. If the government stopped selling its gold reserves, Gould and Fisk could artificially inflate prices and then cash out before the crash. To make it happen, Gould infiltrated the highest levels of power, bribing Treasury officials and cultivating connections inside President Ulysses S. Grant's administration. For weeks, he played the nation like a fiddle, sending gold prices soaring until Grant finally released federal gold, triggering an economic collapse that ruined thousands of investors. Gold walked away rich while the country spiraled into financial panic. His manipulation of the executive branch showed that America's markets were not governed by law or logic, but by men like him, who could turn national policy into personal profit. Jay Gould was more than a robber baron. He was the first man to prove that chaos itself could be monetized. At number 1, we have Minor Cooper Keith, the uncrowned king of the tropics. Minor Cooper Keith achieved a level of corporate power so vast that it reshaped the map of the Western Hemisphere. Beginning as a railroad builder in Costa Rica, Keith leveraged infrastructure contracts into enormous land concessions, turning tropical jungles into private plantations. From those ventures grew the United Fruit Company, founded in 1899, which would soon dominate the economies of Central America and the Caribbean. By the early 20th century, UFC controlled over 3.5 million acres of land, ports, and railroads, effectively running nations like Honduras, Costa Rica, and Guatemala as private subsidiaries. Local leaders rose and fell at Keith's command, and when resistance emerged, the company simply called on Washington. The U.S. State Department and military repeatedly intervened on UFC's behalf, toppling governments and occupying nations to protect corporate profits. This unholy alliance between business and state birthed the term Banana Republic, describing countries whose sovereignty was traded for fruit and freight. Unlike other robber barons who manipulated Congress or courts, Keith controlled foreign policy itself. He turned America's diplomatic and military muscle into the enforcement wing of his empire, setting the stage for decades of U.S. interventionism in Latin America. Minor Cooper Keith wasn't just a tycoon, he was the unelected emperor of the tropics, proving that corporate ambition could conquer nations just as easily as markets. The robber barons didn't just influence Washington, they built it in their image. Unlike today's billionaires who work through lobbyists and loopholes, these Gilded Age titans defined the laws themselves, bending the entire system to protect their empires. Their corruption was so vast, it sparked a public uprising, one that birthed antitrust laws and the progressive era itself. History's warning is clear: unchecked power always finds its way back to the throne. Like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's darkest empires. Thanks for watching.